Okay, so in this video, I'm going to show you a really quick and easy way to use AWS Codestar to quickly develop and build out a CI/CD pipeline and deploy an ASP.NET Core MVC web application. This is what I found to be one of the easiest ways to do it. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into the AWS Codestar service, and you can get that from the console itself and by typing in Codestar, and it's the easiest way to get there. And if here we're going to actually create the project. So we're going to create the project, and this is going to do a number of things for us. First off, it's going to allow us to choose from an existing template. And kind of these templates are kind of, there's a lot of them out there. You can do Lambda templates. You can do it for different languages, obviously. And what you can do is search for the one you want, and then it's going to kind of help us walk us through building out a complete CI/CD pipeline, including deploying things to, including a deployment, obviously, but also setting up a repository so that we can actually do get check-ins and pulls and clones of the code and so forth. So which is good, because then obviously we're not usually doing these applications individually. They're typically done in a team environment. And a CI/CD pipeline allows us to automate as much of this as possible. So Codestar is a really nice kind of way to get going. So what I'm going to do, since we're going to be using ASP.NET Core, I want to go ahead and pick C#. So I'm going to pick down here from the templates, and I'm just going to filter on C# templates. And as you can see, there's a lot of other services and application types that you can pick. But since we're focused on .NET, we're going to pick C#. So there's two options. Once you filter on C#, you've got ASP.NET Core Web Application, and you got Web Service. So we're going to do a web app because we want this to be a functioning web application. So we're going to do that, and then it's actually going to deploy it on an EC2 instance. So it's going to handle all of that provisioning as part of what this project will do. So we'll select next. We'll give it a project name. We'll say my great web app. Right, and give a project name, and it's going to go ahead and create a repository for us to put the code out. So you can either use code commit, which is AWS's version of a Git repository, or you can use GitHub if you want. I'm going to use code commit just because it's kind of nice and pretty easy to use, and we'll just go with that one. I'm going to go ahead and pick the defaults here. You can obviously decide, again, this is going to be deploying to an EC2 instance. You can pick which instance you want this to be deployed to. For our purposes, we're just going to use this T2 micro, which is kind of a simple one. It's enough for what we're trying to do. And we're going to deploy it to our default VPC. If you had other VPCs, you would check that here, and specific subnets. If you needed this to have public access or private, be privately provisioned, you can do that as well. Most important thing here is make sure you pick a key pair. Again, this key pair is what was used to provide credentials to the instance that's getting created. So if you don't have a key pair, you're going to create one ahead of time. Just make sure you have one or choose one that you know where it is. I'm just going to pick one that I know I have. If you don't do this, then you won't be able to shell in or SSH into the instance. This is eventually going to get deployed to a Linux environment. So we want to be able to shell into that later on to do some sort of configuration or whatever you need to do from a management standpoint. We want to do that. We'll go ahead and click Next. And we'll just confirm all the information here and click Create Project. Now what that's going to do is going to do a number of things. It's going to set up the repository. It's going to set up a CI/CD pipeline and some other things. And it's going to take a little while. So we'll go ahead and let that thing roll. Once it's done, we'll walk through and kind of show you the different options here. And then we'll show you how to then take the sample application that they provide and replace it or make changes to it to match our application that we want to write. We'll do that next. All right, so once it's done, again, it'll take a few minutes for that to go through. We have access to a number of things here which we'll walk through. Is obviously on the overview, you can kind of see some of the details and some of the resources and what it created. And again, just like anything else, there's really no fee or charge specifically for Codestar, but you are charged for the specific services that you create underneath the covers. So anything that's created, EC2 instances that are running, you're charged for that. So at the end of the day, if you're doing these demos and tutorials, you should obviously make sure you clean things up at the end just so you don't charge. So the IDE basically, we'll come back to this, but we're going to be using Visual Studio for our IDE. But if you're using Cloud9, they give you instructions on kind of how to set up those environments. But we're not going to use that. We're going to use a different IDE. So we'll come back to that. I do want to show you the repository. Remember that this Codestar created a code commit repository. Code commit is basically their Git, AWS's Git repository. So you can save all your artifacts and code out there. So it set that up for us and gave it a name here. If I click on it, you can kind of see the detail. This is everything that's currently in there. So it actually created a readme file and it put a number of the files that are needed. This is one of the huge benefits of using something like Codestar is it does a lot of this heavy lifting and setting these up. It's if you're kind of going through this for the first time, there's quite a bit that you kind of need to know. So to me, I think it's easy to start with this, and then you can kind of get familiar with what does the app spec YAML do, what does the build spec YAML do, but they set all this for you so that you have an application that works right out of the box. Also, if we go back to Codestar and kind of look at the, go back in our project here and go back and look at this. The other thing that you'll do is there is a CI/CD pipeline that's here. So the entire pipeline is set up. So anytime code changes are made or pushed out to the code commit repository, it's going to automatically kick off this pipeline. It's going to pull the code, it's going to build the code, and it's actually going to deploy it. In this case, this template uses AWS CloudFormation. So it's going to deploy it to an EC2 or EC2 instance as well. So as I mentioned, it does create EC2 instances, and this template does. So if I go back here and kind of look at the look at the instance. There's this is the one that it created right here, my web app. So this is the one that's created for us. So this is part of that pipeline. You can kind of see that it's running on Amazon Linux, which is what we expect because that's who we selected. And you can kind of see some of the other details. So it actually is a provisioned EC2 instance that was set up, and again, you are charged for that. So that's part of it. So all our applications will be set up and the code will be pushed out and deployed to that EC2 instance using this pipeline. So again, here it is. There's the pipeline. It creates a change set. It executes it and deploys it out there. So anytime code is changed, it's going to run through this. Now, this pipeline here is called as part of code pipeline. So you can actually change it, right? So you can add to it. You can make other changes. So if you want to add more steps, you are free to make whatever change you want to this pipeline to expand it. If you want to add more testing, if you want to do anything else with deployments and maybe change some of the settings, you can do that all through this pipeline. At the end of the day, there's also a button up here that you can view the application. So if I click on it, there it is, it's running. So I have this application sitting out here on AWS, and it is in fact a fully live website that we can then use now and try to modify it. So let's do that next. Okay, so here I am in my IDE. Again, we're using Visual Studio 2019, and this is basically, I just installed this from the website, Microsoft website, for installing Visual Studio 2019 Community Edition. Very easy to do. Just make sure when you install it that you choose the option for the language and for the platform you're going to be using. In our case, I just make sure you install .NET Core as part of that installation. I'm not going to spend energy showing you that. I kind of assume you already know how to do that, or you can watch one of the other videos to show you how to do that. The only other thing I will mention is that we have also installed the AWS extension here. So if I type in AWS, they have a toolkit. So just make sure you install that. I already have it installed on this platform. That'll give you access to the AWS toolkit, as well as giving you access to some other built-in extensions inside IDE. So that gives this AWS Explorer that you can kind of see all the resources. Again, all right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take, Codestar created that repository for us out on Code Commit. Okay, so we saw that, it created that. So let's go ahead and see if we can connect and get the code down so we can make changes to it. So we're going to go over to Team Explorer, and we're going to then see the option here for Manage Connections. You're going to select AWS Code Commit, and you're going to want to click Clone. All right. Now, when you click clone, and assuming you have everything set up correctly, if you're having issues with security, you want to resolve that first. Remember, you have to set up the access keys for the account, and I've kind of already done that in this instance. That's why I was able to get to the repository. So, if everything's working correctly, you should see a list of all of the repositories that are out under code commit under your account. Here's the code commit repository that Codestar created for us. And I want to go ahead and clone that locally. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And you can get a location of where you want to go to. I'm just going to pick the defaults and click go. Now what it's going to do is it's going to tell me that we need to have get credentials. All right, so you will need to have created get credentials through AWS in order to pull down and log in order to do the get pull or the get clone of the repository. So let's go ahead and do that next. Okay, so here I am now back in the IAM console window here, and I'm going to make a couple changes. So I'm on my specific user that I created, and you'll kind of notice a couple things here is that Codestar went ahead and created some additional policies for us, and these are policies that are needed to run Codestar for our application, and also I happen to have administrator access as well as I have access to Elastic Beanstalk that you may or may not need depending on what you're trying to do. The thing we need to do for having access to code commit is we need to go to security credentials, and we need to come down here and generate get credentials for AWS code commit. So we're going to do that here. So I'm going to click generate credentials, and it's going to go ahead and give me a username and a password. We want to go ahead and download those because we'll need to add those and put those into Visual Studio. So we'll go ahead and save that, and we'll close that out. So we now have get credentials that we can then use to do a get clone of our repository for our application. So let's go ahead back into Visual Studio and let's check that out next. All right, so here we are. I'm back to Visual Studio. So you have the option to either have Visual Studio try to create the credentials for you, but since we did that by hand, let's click no here. And then here we'll actually go ahead and plug in the username and password that we downloaded. So go back to that file that we got, the access keys file, and go ahead and paste in the code commit username and the password that you received. All right, let's go ahead and save OK there. And then it went ahead, if the credentials are fine, which it should be since I just created it, it's going to go ahead and clone that repository down. So now if I go over to Solution Explorer, I can see here is that application. Here is the entire solution for my web application. It also created a test application to go with it. So if we wanted to do automated testing, which is a good idea to do as part of a CI/CD pipeline. But here is my web application. Fully working, fully functioning. If I wanted to, I can run this locally. Let's go ahead and click this and click Google Chrome. Let's run it. Hit Control F5. Let's let it compile, so it's going to build locally for me, and everything looks good. I should see my website. So there it is. There's my functioning website. Everything looks good locally. All right, I know it's local because I see the local host there. So we think the application was completely cloned correctly, and now I'm ready to make whatever changes I want to make and push it back into my CI/CD pipeline that was created. So let's do that next. Let's make a quick change here. I'm going to go into the views and go to the home page and just make a quick little change here. I'm going to change the app to my great web app. All right, and I'll just make one more change here. All right, make two changes so we can kind of see that. All right, so again, we'll go ahead and save those locally, and we'll then push those back out to the repository. So there's my change. So I'm going to say small change. All right, and I'll go ahead and commit that locally. and then once I'm committed it locally, I'll go ahead and push that back out to code commit. So that's going to be, there's pushing it. So it took those objects out and it went ahead and pushed it back out to code commit. If I go over to my pipeline, if I go back into Visual Studio, I'll be able to switch back to Codestar and jump into my project, and I should be able to see the pipeline in progress. So flip over there. There's my pipeline, and there you go. So this is the pipeline running. So it actually had already once I made that change, it went ahead and pulled it. So that's saying that it actually did successfully pull the code. All right, now it's in the process of building that. Once it's done building, it's going to go ahead and do the full deploy. So let's go ahead and wait for that to happen, and then we'll test out to see if our change is there. Okay, so it looks like if you wait a little bit, everything should be deployed. Everything is green, succeeded all the way down. So that entire pipeline is completed. So if I go back into View Application again, we should see my changes. So let's go ahead and see. There it is. Migrate Web App is up there. And let's see where the other change was. I made one other change, I thought. Where are you? Let's see. I think I changed. Yep, there it is. So the change is actually in the link at the bottom there. It should say at the bottom, this is a great website. So it's actually part of the link itself. So it did work. I did make my changes. So now you have a fully functioning CI/CD pipeline that you can then use to completely change your application. So you can completely change this application the way you need to, and you have a template that actually works, and you can extend as you need. Okay. And with that, the only thing I'll say is just make sure before you're done that you go back in and clean things up. So let's go back to projects here, and I'm going to go ahead and delete that. All right, that's going to go off, and it's going to delete the corresponding services. Just make sure you delete the resources with it. The one thing it will not delete, not that it matters, and it's probably a good thing, is it will keep your code out there. So if you went into code commit, your repository is still there, and you can decide if you want to delete that or not. I'll go ahead and delete it just so that it doesn't stick around. Click delete on that one, so that'll go away. So everything that should be being cleaned up, and you should probably go in and also clean up some of the roles that were created through IAM. That's another thing too, but you don't get charged for those. So the most important thing is to make sure that you clean up the EC2 instances. We should start to see those going away. There it is. That one's getting kind of de-provisioned, if you will. So everything looks like it's cleaned up. With that, we'll stop. Thanks so much.